Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CP3 NYCHA and Session 8 Subcommittee meeting for Monday, December 6, 2021. My name is Jackie Wong. I'm the acting chair of this subcommittee. Tonight, we are conducting the meeting through Zoom, and we have a few guidelines. First is that non-community board members, please sign in the chat. If you have any technical questions, you can ask in the chat box, but the chat is only for that purpose. You cannot use it to make any comments about issues or have a side discussion. And if anyone wants to speak, please just raise your Zoom hand. You'll be recognized first. This is to make sure we have a smooth meeting. So I see Paul is with us tonight. He's actually helping with our Zoom. So Paul Rango is our newly elected board chairperson. I want to congratulate Paul, and also I want to thank Paul for stepping up when the community board needs him. Paul also has the power to appoint the next NYCHA subcommittee chair. So Paul, do you have anything to share with us?
Not immediately, but thank you, Jackie, for that warm welcome. I'm intrigued to hear about everything tonight. As I've kind of told people already, I'm going to be listening to a lot of different committees as I've now stepped into my role as the full board chair. So I'm going to be listening a lot tonight, but of course I'm going to be the Zoom facilitator as well for Jackie. So I'll be focused on that, and hopefully tonight runs well. I know there is a specific item to address roles and responsibilities later on, and I will talk a lot more then. Once again, just to remind everybody to please, if you're not a community board member, to please sign in to the chat with your name and affiliation, and we'll go from there. And Jackie, all back to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. And besides Paul, I also want to thank Alicia for her years of service as our former board chair. We all understand it is a big commitment, both time and energy, but you did it, Alicia. Thank you so much. Let me see. And then I also see Tariq just joined. I want to congratulate Tariq too. Tariq is our newly elected second vice chair. Second vice chair, yes. And I look forward to seeing you at the exec.
Don't forget Laura. She's our new vice secretary as well.
Oh, and Laura is our new vice secretary. Congratulations, Laura. I totally forget, but thank you. And Laura, I'm so glad to see you at the exec. So first, Ariana, can you do a roll calling to take the attendance, please?
Sure. Jackie Wong.
Present.
Alicia Lewis-Coleman.
Present.
Eric Diaz. Eric Diaz. Okay. Kaniel Hernandez.
Present.
Laura Lugo.
Present.
Tariq Dareel. Tariq?
He's on.
Yes.
Okay, I'll come back to him.
He just say yes.
He just said yes. He's on. He's on.
Perfect. Sandra Strother.
He's on leave, I think.
Okay. Troy Velez.
Yes.
Ariadna Chua present, and then Camille Napoleon. Okay.
Doesn't look like she's here. That's it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Ariana. So tonight, our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for our October meeting. Let me know if anyone has problem with our minutes, or we'll just approve it. Okay, I see no questions. So the minute is approved. The minutes are approved. So Damaris is here. And our second item on the agenda is about the blueprint. So the blueprint is a legislation introduced by our Senator Brian Kavanagh. He's with us tonight because we asked him to give us an update on the status, not because he's trying to push the legislation. We also have Katie Loeb from Kalina's office, and I believe there's another person from Harvey's office. Anyone from Harvey Epstein's office? Senator, Assemblyman Harvey's office? Okay.
I don't see anybody on from Harvey's office.
Okay, thank you. And Damaris is from Go, so they will share their point of view with us later as well. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that CP3 has the second largest amount of NYCHA units in the city. So we just would like to learn more about this plan. But tonight, we are not going to make any resolution. It's just an information session for us to educate ourselves. So Brian, do you want to talk about this blueprint?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. Thank you for having me. And I also didn't know I would have the opportunity to congratulate so many of the new officers tonight. But congratulations to all of you, and also thanks again to all the officers that have served so ably in the prior term. So yeah, I just want to emphasize something Jackie said, which is usually when a public official comes to a community board, it's because they've got this idea and they want to sell it to people and they want to kind of move it forward in the near future. I want to emphasize that we introduced this bill late in the last session. On June 2nd, I put out a joint statement with the chair of the Assembly Housing Committee, Steve Simberwitz, who is the co-sponsor of the bill in the Assembly. And we said at that time that we have heard, lots of conversations and had lots of concerns from resident leaders and others concerned about the future of public housing, including several people who were present at this meeting. And for that reason, we were not moving forward without much further consultation with residents and others. And so that was on June 2nd. And I want to say at the outset that status has not changed. We will be back in session in 30 days on January 5th. But I, as the sponsor of the bill, fully acknowledge that we need to have many further conversations before we would consider moving this bill forward. But having been asked to come explain what I can about the bill, I certainly didn't want to turn down that request from the community board. So here we are. So just I'm going to try to just brief. The trust is a complicated idea. I'm going to try to summarize it briefly if I can. But basically, the idea behind the trust is that the state, through state legislation, would create a fully public entity, which is like, it's like a public agency. We have numerous public agencies that are created by the state legislature, including the New York City Housing Authority. And that agency would be authorized with various approvals, assuming the bill were passed and signed into law by the governor, to effectively have NYCHA, with the approval of NYCHA and with the approval of the board of the new entity, transfer legal responsibility for the buildings basically under an agreement with NYCHA, where NYCHA would retain ownership, but there would be a transfer that would permit the new trust to, first of all, bring significant more federal money per unit to the management of these units, and then also enable it to do renovations through kind of procurement processes that NYCHA doesn't have access to, with the idea that they could bring in some of the bigger construction companies that are able to do renovations on whole developments, and not just kind of the lowest bidder contracts that NYCHA basically has to use by law at the moment. The transfer would have to be approved by HUD, and it would only be approved in an agreement that brings that additional money. So if absent the additional money, this trust effectively wouldn't do anything. It's important to emphasize that there is no contemplation of change in management, in the underlying management of the properties going forward, and that there is no element of privatization in this proposal, unlike RAD, which is a process by which a public-private entity with a private company partly owning the company takes possession of NYCHA properties. And those deals have been done around the city and they've been controversial. This is intended to be a fully public entity. Again, it would draw down money from a different stream. The stream of funding would be the Section 8 stream of funding under the federal government rather than Section 9, which is the thing that funds public housing. The reason people think that is desirable is that Section 8 is funded at a much higher rate per unit than Section 9. And that has been true now for a very long time. And it is expected to be true going well into the future. So the other thing to note is that, so this, as many people know, this was originally an idea proposed by the New York City Housing Authority, by Greg Russ, who chairs the New York City Housing Authority. I know there's some skepticism. I see some expressions of skepticism in the faces of a couple of people who are on my screen. But I want to emphasize that this is a bill that would have to be passed by both houses of the legislature, and the bill would say what the legislature says it's going to say, not what NYCHA says it's going to say or City Hall says it's going to say. So we have an opportunity, if we were to move forward with this, to incorporate any protections and assurances that people want to see before we move forward with this. We've already amended their original proposal, so it has more restrictions and more protections. We decided in June that we were not ready to move forward given where we are. So I think I will stop there. And I realize there's a lot of moving parts there, and it's sort of complicated, but happy to do if people have specific questions or general responses. And again, I am not here to defend this bill as written, because as I say, a lot more work is going to need to go into it before we would consider trying to move forward with it. But let me stop there.
Thank you, Senator. The reason we have this item on our agenda is because 2 months ago, when we discussed the Campbell Plaza 1 plan, and because it's similar to blueprint, so we talk about it, and I think the council member's office also have some different opinions. So that's why we want to know what are our elected officers' position on this, because the blueprint, we understand, has a big if it goes through, it would have a big impact on a lot of on every NYCHA unit and property. So we want to hear different.
Right.
So Katie, do you want to share with us your office position on this?
Yeah, so as Senator Kavanaugh said, the bill is going to be rewritten in the state, and we'll be following along and making sure that our constituents are represented. The councilwoman believes that there's a much needed, and we need to invest much more in NYCHA, and we need to preserve our permanent public housing. What that looks like is going to really need to center residents of NYCHA and listen to their voices. So we'll continue to do that, and we can, we're definitely willing to work collaboratively with our colleagues in Albany on how are we doing outreach, how are we doing, getting information from our constituents, and just ensuring that, this is a public process that really engages people who live in NYCHA.
So your office main concern is about the outreach, or there are some technical concerns in that plan that you have problem with, or just the outreaching part?
Yeah, well, we want to make sure that the voices of residents of NYCHA is, what is driving any kind of bill that will legislation, budget item, policy that will impact people living in NYCHA. The people impacted need to be the people who are, part of that process. So in terms of what this bill is now, as the senator said, we anticipate a lot of, we anticipate a process where people are gonna, put forward ideas, and we want to listen to those ideas and hear what people want for themselves. And that's what, we would really be interested in. The bill as is, it's gonna see revisions. So that's not, I'm not looking in the nitty gritty right now. I'm like looking to hear from people who live in NYCHA.
Thank you. Thank you. We also have some advocates and also NYCHA residents here. Damaris, you want to talk about, I mean, blueprint is not a new thing. We've been talking about it for a couple, 2 or 3 years or more than that. And I think most of us understand the basic idea of it, but like as the bill keep being revised, I guess we probably need to be updated, like what are the major changes? So Damaris, you want to share with us your ideas and insights? Where's Damaris?
I'm sorry. I put myself, I'm always forgetting to take myself off of mute. So first, hello everyone. It's good to see everyone again. And I can't wait till I can see you all in person. And thank you, Senator Kavanaugh, for coming to speak to the committee about this. You and I have had several conversations about the blueprint. The first thing I want to say about the blueprint is that the blueprint, you might have heard the blueprint and the transformation plan. It's interchangeable. It's the same thing. What the blueprint will cover RAD, PACT, and it will also cover the Preservation Trust, which is what Brian Kavanaugh talked about in terms of what the state legislature is going to be creating with if the bill becomes law. And so there are a few things that I would like to say. One is that residents are very skeptical. You are right, and you did read a lot of faces correctly. As you know, because you've talked with a lot of folks and you know how people feel. And they are afraid of this plan and many plans that have come before it for the single reason that there has not really been a plan that can guarantee the residents that NYCHA will not move towards privatization. And I'll explain why residents feel that way. And I know that you said this doesn't do that, but there's still the issue of bonds and other ways in which they may need to seek revenue that could put the properties at risk. So part of what the Preservation Trust would do is create this entity and then allow HUD, allow the Housing Authority to request that, let's say 25,000 has been the number that they've been floating around, units can be moved from Section 9 funding, which is your traditional public housing, to Section 8 funding, which is the funding that Senator Kavanaugh has stated people feel more positive about. That is what they hope, but that is not all the money. If they do that, that does not mean that they will get all of the money that they need to make every single repair and deal with all the backlog. It will help, but they will still probably need more money. And so what people are afraid of is that they will now, because of the new entity, and have positioned themselves to either leverage bonds or other financing tools, that the mere point of doing that, if for some reason, for whatever reason, NYCHA could potentially foreclose, or they could, not guarantee the funding. Now, the city has the ability to guarantee funding, but they're never going to do that because they have to spread themselves around all of their city agencies. So when there's not a guarantee that the funding or the mechanism itself will not lead to further, opportunities to leverage and get more money that could make, that could lead to privatization, that is a big concern for folks off the bat. The second thing is that Section 9 funding and Section 8 funding are very different in the way in which they are applied. The rules of those programs are applied to those projects. So the Section 8 protections are not the same for residents in terms of tenant rights as the Section 9 protections are. Once you move them out of Section 9, now they're no longer considered traditional public housing, and all the rules that guarantee them protections as tenants don't apply in the same way. they have another set of rules. It's not to say that some are not the same, but they are not all the same. And this is also why during RAD, which is a version of this, there had to be a whole handbook created to contend with how to make sure tenants' rights are protected. And again, we're still seeing a lot of challenges with the RAD program because that is not federal legislation that guarantees those protections. That's more like policy that was created here in New York City to provide those protections. So those are two major issues. One, that the funding, that NYCHA's desire or need to get more funding will not bring enough money from HUD, so they may have to, choose additional routes. And two, that we will not have the same protections for our residents. And that's a big deal, right? Those are big deals. There are things like hearings, administrative hearings. There are things like, different types of policies that are in place that give, public housing residents a lot of protection, whereas in Section 8, it's not like that. And even tenant organizing in Section 8 is weakened. That's another thing that people are not clear of. So if in the end, this bill were to gain any traction, in our opinion, we could only consider supporting it if it could respond to all those issues in the way in which we believe is necessary. That would be the only way. Like, the legislation would have to be able to make sure that our tenant rights are protected. There could be no gaps, no loopholes. Tenant organizing would have to remain front and center. It is the one thing that we've had, here in New York City that has allowed for so many residents to be involved and for us not to be more privatized, or have lost more units than we have lost. So those things have to be front and center. So, I know I didn't take you through the whole issue, but I mean, the senator laid out what they're doing. I'm just saying these are the issues that are of primary concern to residents all over the city. It is not just the Lower East Side. There is a huge movement of resident leaders all across the city. And we do appreciate that, I appreciate that Senator Kavanaugh has spoken to us and continues to remain, to keep the lines of communication open. And we hope that through continued dialogue, we can either A, get rid of this and figure out something new, or strengthen this so that all the protections we need are in place. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, we are in trouble. And nobody's denying that we are in trouble and that we do need resources. But we cannot do so at the expense of privatizing our units or putting them in any way at harm's length. And while we do have a new chair, I do want to point out, and while he's a pleasant man, if you have a conversation with him, I mean, this is not about people's personalities, right? But the track record that he's had in other cities is that he has instituted similar programs there. And it has not, I guess from an administrative standpoint, maybe it seems like it's successful, but it hasn't really been as successful when it comes to the point of view for the residents who are actually impacted. And, I'd actually, if it's possible, I'd like to have Marquise say a couple of words because we're working very closely, and maybe Manir. Manir, are you there? He might have stepped away because,
yes, I'm here.
Okay. I would like to give them each a minute or two, if possible, to weigh in on any concerns that I might have missed or anything that they want to highlight for the committee and the senator.
Sure. Damaris, I mean, the blueprint is not a new thing to us. So the 2 points you just made, the worry about privatization and also tenants' rights, I've been hearing that since I don't recall when, you've been educating us on that for a long time. So it seems like, why is that not moving to the direction that the advocacy or the advocates wants to move? Because what is the why is there no progress on that? You are still talking about the worry about privatization. You are still talking about the tenants' right protection. It seems like you've been talking about that for the last 2-3 years.
Well, it is moving. We're not private yet. Our rights are still protected.
Yep.
So I think we're doing a damn good job.
Can I also, Jackie and can I jump in a little bit? I also want to hear from Marquise and Rainier and obviously anybody else. And I think probably a few folks on here want to speak. But just I agree wholeheartedly with both of those points. Like, we are not going to pass a bill that has a meaningful chance that NYCHA properties get privatized. And we are not going to pass a bill that does not protect those rights, the rights that existing tenants have. And I want to emphasize that. One of the big differences between RAD and this is that RAD was an idea that came up, was invented in Washington, right? Like Sean Donovan was chair of HUD. He ran for mayor. He didn't do so well, but he was the chair of HUD, and he had this great new idea, which was RAD, right? And it was going to.
It was actually called Petra.
What's that?
It was actually first called Petra.
Petra. I forget. There have been a number.
And then it became RAD. We'll talk more later.
Because people would be petrified. But
that's why they changed the name.
Right. But I mean, so rental assistance demonstration. But the idea here is that we would, unlike RAD, this would come into being through a state law that is not controlled by NYCHA and is not a negotiation about what the rules are going to be when NYCHA does RAD developments. This would be a statute that is just as binding as any other statute, including the federal laws around public housing. So the bill, and I don't want to get into the question of whether the current bill meets the standard, the very high standard that Damaris is laying out. But I agree with the standard, and we would need to make sure, like the bill, the current draft of the bill says Section 3 rights apply in terms of residents getting work, rights to tenant association. They'd done an earlier draft and said they had to acknowledge a tenant association. We made them change the language that says that the day anything is transferred, they have to acknowledge the existing tenant association immediately. There's no new process to create a new tenant association. The rights to hearings, the right to, retaining your tenancy unless you violate the same provisions that are in federal law. So what we would do is statutorily list all those protections. We could enhance those protections in a statute. And again, it would be the state legislature, both houses of the legislature, putting those things in place, the governor signing it. And then the only way to change that would be to get both houses of the legislature and the governor to agree to change it, which is, again, frankly, it's harder to pass a bill like that than to undo it, because, all it takes is your assembly members or your senators, whoever they are in the future, to say no. So the goal here is to create ironclad protections. And again, we acknowledged in May and June that we weren't there, and we certainly weren't there to the satisfaction of the residents. So we pulled the bill. And again, the bill is still on hold until further consultation and further amendments. And the goal is to make people confident that the rights are protected, and this is going to improve things, not jeopardize tenants.
Thank you, Senator. I have a question, but I want to give Marquise and another person, Mira, the time to speak. Marquise?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Of course, I echo everything Damaris says, and I do thank Senator Kavanaugh for coming personally and talking to my group of residents to preserve public housing about this issue. In addition to the two things that Damaris mentioned, the third thing I would add, the critical piece is that residents were left out of the conversation. Right? When they implemented this blueprint for change proposal, they implemented it during the height of COVID-19, where the tenant associations were busy and focused on taking care of their residents. They had no opportunity or the mechanisms to really understand and learn. The bill was introduced, and then a few days later, there was a hearing. So not only were they not able to prepare to read, but they were not even able to prepare to testify at a hearing. And while I say that residents should have been put at the table, it's a good gesture. It's not merely a good gesture. There are federal rules and regulations that requires the housing authority to consult with the residents from conception, not after a plan has been developed. So residents have been left out, and as you can see through this process, as Senator Kavanaugh is laying out, they've had to revamp the bill every time residents have come to speak up. Residents are the experts. They understand and they know. There have been no conversations about other avenues that we can explore to generate more revenue. There's a lot of discussion about resident management. There's all types of programs, and residents have simply been left out of the conversation. And so I guess I'll end with a question about sort of what is the next action you plan to take on this particular bill, because those rights and rules and regulations are critical, and we can't protect residents' rights by violating their rights.
Is that a question for me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. The next step is many more further conversations before we proceed. I don't want to say I'm going to talk to this person, I'm going to talk to that person, but a lot, and I spent 3 hours with you and your group, and I thank you for convening. You convened a wide range of representatives of public housing authorities, of public housing developments all over the city. And I took all the questions there and the concerns and heard them and did my best to respond to them. But we are not planning on moving forward without, we're having a conversation tonight because, this committee decided this was a good time for a conversation about this. We are not moving forward without many further conversations with you and the other people on this call tonight, and the other representatives of public housing and goals and everybody else, and a citywide representative group to figure out whether there is a version of this that people feel is satisfactory. And that's I don't want to guess what those things are. Like, I know, I have pushed. I introduced this bill in May. I didn't introduce it sooner because I thought there were so many obvious sort of defects that I said, like, we're not introducing it. By the way, it would have, until I got my hands on it, it would have allowed them to transfer basically all of the units to like the whole place. And I said, that's crazy. Like, you have to do some, even if this gets approved, you do some of it so people can see if that works or doesn't work. And that's where that cap of 25,000. I don't know if 25,000 is the right number. It's a big number still, right? But there's a lot of, we have to look through this. We have to go through it. We have to make sure tenants are, represented in the process. We want to make sure tenants have some, access to expertise who can look at it on their behalf as well and advise them independently of NYCHA and the legislature. We did not have hearings that were intended to move this bill forward. I would expect we would have public hearing. Oh, sorry, forgive me. The Assembly had a hearing. I will note the Assembly had a hearing in December of last year with a much earlier version of this bill that I was not willing to even introduce because I thought it was like insufficient. It was like sort of defective in fairly obvious ways. And I'm not faulting. I think the Assembly decided, let's get started early. So they put a bill in so they could have a hearing. I looked at it and I was like, this isn't ready for even a public discussion. I did think by May, at least they had the elements of a bill that kind of, legal aid thought it was good. The Community Service Society thought it was good. We did hear from some tenants who thought it was good. And Richie Torres, who's been beating the heck out of NYCHA for his whole life, thought it was pretty good. So we decided to put it in. And again, putting a bill.
I beg to differ, but
What's that?
I beg to differ about him. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's fair. Okay, I see a lot of enthusiasm for that point of view as well. All I will say is, like, we put the bill in the Senate so that it would exist in the public domain. The bill everybody was talking about, oh, there's this bill, there's a new draft. It's a mysterious thing. Once you introduce it, all of the words are available in public on the Senate website, and everybody could look at it. And I thought that was a step in the right direction in terms of being transparent. And we heard very aggressive concerns about the particulars and also about the process. And so we put the brakes on it. And the brakes are still on it. And again, I do suspect that there might be a version of this that we could work out if we talk to tenant associations, tenant representatives, and experts and organizations like Goals enough. I think we might be able to get to the point where we have something that people will think is good. But if we can't, then that speaks loudly. And as Damaris says, we do need to figure out something different than what we've done in the past. And again, one thing is like straight up more money. And I've been trying to get $500 million a year for NYCHA for the last 15 years. I have not succeeded. I now have a new governor to talk to because the last governor was particularly hostile to that goal. And I think you're going to see a different result in the upcoming state budget. I'd also note that the federal government is still talking about Build Back Better having somewhere between $33 and $37 billion with a B. And I talked to Chuck Schumer as recently as a few days ago, and they are still optimistic that they're going to get giant amounts of capital. So I don't want to say no one cares more because people say that, but I really care about getting this right and taking care of public housing across the city. And as the housing chair, it's my job to make sure that happens. And we're not going to move forward with this without addressing these concerns in minute detail. And if NYCHA can't do a process that includes everybody, we will do a process that includes everybody before we move forward.
Thank you, Senator. NYCHA, I see your hand. You're going to go after Munir.
Yeah, I would just like to chime in real quick. Thank you, Senator. But I would like to say the version that you just gave us is actually residents shredding the plan from its conception. And so it's like y'all came back with a better version of the blueprint after we broke it down. One, the funding. Who, if NYCHA can't pay this loan back, who has the keys to the house? Also the protections. And we see that across the nation, NYCHA stock has been decreased. So we know that NYCHA has the best affordability and the best protections. I would like to see NYCHA preserved. I think it's the standard of affordability. And you say it's not like RAD, but it really is. It's just in a different outfit. If you ask me, when it comes to privatization, it still has Section 8 behind it. Section 8 funding is still located in the bill. For me, I'm just frustrated on how we can't uplift Section 9. There's no way we could not amend Section 9 to bring back the proper funding. And for me, I'm new to this, new to some of these things, but I'm just wishful thinking of how could we strengthen Section 9? How could all of this new money coming in? How could instead of a blueprint, how could we be talking about more operational and capital funding going moving forward in long term instead of a preservation trust where it puts residents in jeopardy 40 or 50 years from now, not 20 or 10, because we have to think about the babies that's coming up in public housing. That's just my piece. And I would just like to question, I would like to question you, Senator, and saying last year before the session ended, we felt that you wasn't forthcoming with letting, as an organizer, I'm, not to throw no shade, I just question, how you look at it and how you should be letting your constituents and residents of the neighborhood chime in as well. So, you see us a lot of leaders here, and I think you could have been tapped in with really getting some great feedback on the blueprint and what you're thinking. So that's
I respect that. And yeah, first of all, let me just start by, I agree with the first thing you said. The version that was introduced in the Assembly and was not introduced in the Senate until May got very substantially better because tenants and their representatives tore up the first version and pointed out a lot of obvious problems with it. And though, again, I said, I'm not introducing it until, and by the way, there's some obvious problems that I came up with too. And I was like, I'm not, it's not a secret that this was proposed initially by the New York City Housing Authority, and the city law department helped them draft and all that. But lots of bills start as drafts by, people who don't work for the legislature. At the end of the day, we're responsible for the language. And yes, I was very aware that tenants had big problems with what was put in, which is why I wouldn't touch it. At some point, it got better, largely, very substantially because of tenant input. And so I agree with that assessment. In terms of Section 9 versus Section 8, if I could fix Section 9, I would love to do that. But Section 9 is a federal program. It has been underfunded for at least 30 years now. I would say that's conservative. At least 30 years consistently, the US Congress has passed budget resolutions and the President of the United States has signed them. And I don't blame any particular president, and I certainly don't blame our representatives like Nydia Velázquez, who have fought like hell for this. But it is just a case that for 3 decades, they've grossly underfunded public housing at the federal level. They have not underfunded Section 8. And I think that is partly because there are so many of these Section 8 vouchers out in the world, and they set a standard for them. And there's just a broader, for better or for worse, there's like, we know how central public housing is, and we think that ought to be enough to fully fund it. But the truth is, Section 8 is now in the hands of a very wide range of parties, private companies, public entities, hundreds of thousands of tenants everywhere. There's much more public housing in New York than everywhere else. So Section 8 is this giant national program, and it is just better funded consistently for decades now. So our idea is to tap into that funding, but not into the rules of that program, not into the flexibility of the program, and not into the privatization of that program. And again, I'm not saying this bill as currently written gets that right, but the goal is to use that funding stream without diminishing the right, to get the best of both worlds, to get that funding stream and then also get all of the assurances and protections that come with public housing. Because the public housing protections only come because of statutes, and we can write statutes. And so again, in terms of putting the thing in and not properly consulting my constituents, one of whom has her hand raised and I'm about to hear from, I think. Oh. I plead guilty to that. It was a crazy session. We were trying desperately to get the eviction moratorium extended. It came up for renewal on May 1st. And it was an ugly fight. People didn't want to extend it at all. And we would have had people evicted all over the place. And getting the rental assistance program, which was also kind of a disaster in May and June. And like, I was juggling all these things, and it was very late in the session. And it's like, okay, there is this bill. And I was hearing all these rumors about what was in it and what wasn't in it. And I said, why don't we put it in so the world can see it? And I also didn't put it in without getting a lot of senators, many of whom talked to their constituents about whether it was good enough to at least put their name on it. About half of the senators who represent public housing in New York put their name on it. And I decided, let's introduce it and so people can see it. I should have made more phone calls to folks in my own community, which I represent very, very proudly. I am proud to be the chair of the Housing Committee, partly because it ought to allow me to do a better job for all of you. And it was a failure on my part that I didn't do more direct outreach so that people weren't surprised to hear that there was a bill. But we never intended to move the bill without lots of input from all of you and frankly from tenants citywide.
And Senator, I agree with you that that was a very busy session, especially with the eviction moratorium and also the ERAP and later the LRAP. It's just a lot of housing issues, and those housing issues were really pressing and are still very pressing. So I just want to thank you for all the great work you put in on those issues. And I understand NYCHA, of course, is a very important issue for our community and also for citywide as well. I appreciate for all your effort you put in all the housing issues.
Jackie,
so you said,
can I just say one thing real quick?
Before Aisha?
I just want to be clear that, Munir and the rest of us, we do know the difference between Section 9 funding being federal and Section,
No, I know, sorry.
They also provide Section 9 funding. And so does the city. When they fund the existing public housing model, that goes into Section 9 funding. It doesn't become Section 8 funding. So what we're saying is that for a really long time, You know, the city and the state have been derelict in their responsibilities to funding public housing Section 8. And that is why we're in this place to also, not just because of the feds, but because even in our own state, there is not enough resources given to these programs as they deplete them. And the last point I want to make about that is public housing has meant so little in this state that even with ERAP, we talk about ERAP, and you know that Goals knows because we serve housing of all kinds, but ERAP deprioritized public housing from receiving funds. And most of those people will not get any money, or NYCHA, and NYCHA, when the last I checked, when I spoke to them, they were down rent to the tune of over $130 million.
Yes.
And ERAP wouldn't even prioritize them. So yet again, another program that prioritizes private landlords over our government landlords who are doing, you know, providing housing for the people. I know that's not you, but I'm just saying, but it is kind of your, I know that that was responsibility. I know that was not your intention with ERAP, but that's what I wound up happening.
Yeah, so just let me respond, even though I also want to hear from Eric, but just to respond to that quickly, I agree on both points. And let me say, first point, if you look at all my statements on NYCHA over a decade now, you will not hear me saying, oh, the federal government has failed us, without saying the city and state have failed us. I say it all the time. We have failed at all levels. We have disinvested at all levels. I say it all the time. The city has failed. The state has, for a long time, the city and state ceased to put their money in for developments that they developed, and it was an outrage. I do not deny the state's culpability in this, and I have banged people over the head with that for years in Albany and elsewhere. It's an outrage. The second thing is the ERAP program. I wrote the original bill that created the ERAP program. Unfortunately, it got folded into the budget process, and I had to negotiate with the governor's office, and they flatly insisted that that language about the public housing being the lowest priority had to be in there, on the theory that they can find other ways to make government agencies like NYCHA whole, but they have not found a way to make them whole. The idea was like, that's HUD's responsibility. HUD has not taken on the responsibility. I will continue to fight to make sure all of that rent gets paid. I will note that the program is currently out of money. There's another $1 billion coming from the federal government, hopefully, that has been applied for. I'm trying to get at least $3 billion more from the federal government. And I will continue to fight to make that whole, if necessary, and I've said this publicly, if necessary, we need to put enough money in the state budget, which is due less than 4 months from now, and you know, the governors have to put it out by January 18th. But we need enough money to cover all of the rent arrears, and that certainly includes NYCHA's arrears. But I agree with you, it's a failing, and I'm the housing chair, so I take some responsibility for not convincing my colleagues.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. Aisha? Aisha?
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for giving me this time to express my opinion as a resident leader. I totally, agree with what Marquise and Damaris have said. But now I'm going to speak on behalf of my residents, which is this. 964 regulations requires that residents be included from conception. The fact that NYCHA absolutely violated the law, used our rent money, our tax dollars to do a bill that would actually take our homes away from us, or rather not our homes, but the protections that we have is beyond unconscionable. In the middle of a pandemic, for the same reasons you said it was a crazy time, do you think that it was not any crazier for resident leaders and for organizations where we try to see who was dying, make sure people didn't die, get them food, and all of those things? This should have been stopped from the moment it started. And so if you think I'm angry, yes, I am, because I think it wasn't even about being disrespectful. It was about actually doing something that when families couldn't even communicate, when people and their families were dying, that we were having to deal with this bill that no one knew about, that was to our detriment. And so for the members on the community board, you know, I would hope that you would have a sitting or have a meeting with the resident leaders in Community Board 3, and there's quite a few of us, to discuss what the issues are and where we stand. And I thank Marquise for doing a great job leading us in that, and for Goals for supporting, you know, a lot of residents and things like that, and for the organizations that have done that. But clearly this bill needs to be thrown, shredded in the garbage can. And the word conception, do we know the meaning of the word conception, right? And that's in 964. And so if you really want to have a meaningful conversation, then everything has to be off the table, and we start with a blank slate and talk about it. If you think that residents, especially like Residents to Preserve Public Housing and Goals organization, we have not talked about how we can improve NYCHA, trust me when I tell you that that's a conversation we constantly have. That's number one. Number two, I just want to say, you know, my campaign that I had for a year and a half, and my was blown away because I found out somebody put in the little print that because I live in Section 9, I could never be the chair of Housing Authority, and my campaign to be the chairperson for NYCHA. One of the reasons I said that was because when NYCHA was run by residents, for residents, we had a reserve, which was taken from us, robbed at our expense. And so I just wanted people to know, and thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you so much. Okay. Senator, you have anything else to add or comment, response?
No, I would just note one other thing, which is, I would note one other thing, which is that the current mayoral administration has 25 more days, and you know, it's an open question who's going to be running NYCHA in the future. And I'm not making any predictions tonight, but you know, there may be, like at minimum, there's a new mayoral administration to talk about. There may also be a new administration at NYCHA to talk about. So we'll see what happens in the next months. But again, you know, again, and I will specifically, I apologize to you at the time. I will apologize again here more publicly. And, you know, apologizing is not as good as, you know, making the call in advance, but I do not and did not intend to sort of jam something through without, you know, full consultation. And, you know, and I maintain that at this point. And at some point, you know, there's a question of whether, you know, as I said, shred it, whether, I mean, there are 10,000 bills introduced in the legislature and only a modest number of them ever move forward. But, you know, if there's anything good and salvageable in this, in the opinion of all of you, we can talk about that. If there are radically different things we should be doing, or different approaches or steps the state legislature can take that are not this bill, I'm open to an ongoing conversation with all of you and with everybody who cares about public housing.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Senator. Committee members, you have any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Senator, I just want to let you know that I myself learned a lot from this conversation. Sometimes this is public policy, and you know, sometimes people may not use very comfortable tones, but I have to say that you did a great job in general in terms of housing issues. So I applaud you for that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, I need to emphasize that Senator is not trying to push the bill. He is here only because we asked him to do so. He is here to share with us because we want to know what's going on with this bill, what is the status of this bill, and we learn a lot of things from him and also from everybody else who are here tonight. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jackie, for chairing this meeting, and thank you all for all of your input and your ongoing advocacy on behalf of residents.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see. So our second item on the agenda is the roles and goals of this committee. So I put this on the agenda item because at the last meeting, a few members brought up some points, and I was really encouraged when I heard that the members are willing to step up to help the committee. Oh, but before we open for that discussion, I want to say that this committee needs a Zoom facilitator and also a secretary. The executive order, state executive order that allow us to use Zoom for meetings would expire, I think, next month. But who knows if this, well, now we have a new variant, and I don't know if the executive order going to be extended, or are we going to still Zoom in February or not? But in January, we still need a Zoom facilitator, and we definitely need a secretary. So I want to ask if anyone want to step up to be the secretary and Zoom facilitator for the future. If not, we'll just rotate among ourselves. But I'm hoping that someone would step up. And tonight, I want to thank Ariana to volunteer as the secretary. And I hope that maybe in the next meeting, we're gonna have a permanent, have a new chair for this committee. But I just feel like it is also my responsibility to take care of this before a new chair is appointed. So anyone wants to volunteer as the secretary? I guess that's more important now.
I feel so lost, Jackie. We changed our chair.
Yes.
Okay. Damaris, I'll just answer that question. There's currently no chair for the NYCHA subcommittee. It is vacant. Jackie's working in the acting capacity. So I'm trying to get a feel for tonight who I can make the chair of NYCHA tonight. So he's trying to take care of the other parts, Zoom facilitator and secretary first before I see who's willing to step up.
Okay.
Okay, so
it's time for me to make my exit before people start looking. I'm gonna.
Damaris, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you are under the weather, and I hope you feel better already.
I'll see you, Thomas. Okay.
Thank you, Damaris. Thank you.
Damaris, you sure you don't want? No, not at all. No takers?
I can't listen.
I know.
I can't even work myself out of this. No.
She really can't.
I'm so, you know what? I mean, who knows? Maybe in the future, but like right now, I mean, y'all don't know this, but I was appointed to be on the transition team for public housing for the mayor-elect, and also for the borough president, incoming borough president. I got my plate full, and my team is kind of really crazy too, but you know, we're always here to help.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Damaris is not on this committee. I asked her to join us tonight, and she was not feeling very good, but she still joined us tonight. So to share the problem she sees in Blueprint with us. So thank you, Damaris.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Jackie, I'm just gonna say something really quick.
Oh, sure.
So there are people on this call tonight who are not members of the community board, and that is, and I'm very appreciative of everybody coming on and bringing in their comments and whatnot. And I believe the community board applications are coming out next month in January for the upcoming term. So if that's something you want to take into consideration and want to be part of any specific committees or anything like that, the application should be coming out next month. So definitely look out for that and apply, and we'll hopefully good things will happen. So that's the one thing I do want to say. I know a lot of people are passionate, I know, about several different issues, and hopefully, you know, you apply. It would be great. It'd be great for me. Let's start off.
Yeah. And we also have the community board also, I mean, each committee also has its own responsibilities. We need a secretary. That is our responsibility. I chair the land use committee. We have a Zoom facilitator. We have a secretary, and those are our board members' responsibilities. So I'm hoping someone would email me tonight saying that, oh, I can do this and I can do that. Otherwise, I'm just gonna rotate the members, and I hope you understand that. So tonight, Ariana is taking the minutes. So thank you, Ariana, for that. Okay, so next I want to share with you is that at the last meeting, I think you guys all talk about your feeling about this committee, and I thought about those comments, and I was trying to see like what can we do as a group to I guess to strengthen this committee, and but there are some limitations. I mean, I'm not an expert in NYCHA, but I feel like I observe some limitations that I feel like I want to share with you first before we open up this discussion. So normally, community board deal with policies, which means that like for example, we talk about blueprints, and blueprints is a big policy. We talk about positions and advocate for certain policies, but we don't deal with management issues. And what I heard, I have a feeling that a lot of the problem in NYCHA right now are management issues. And also, NYCHA is not a city agency. So from a community board's point of view, I feel like, do we have a lot of leverage on that? I mean, you heard from Senator Ryan, like for example, Section 9, it is a lot of agency, a lot of level of governments I'm dealing with. Like I also want to give you guys an example. For example, we spend a lot of time on Mercedes, and we did a wrestle on Mercedes. We did a wrestle to ask the comptroller's office to use the capital money instead of operating, well, because NYCHA doesn't have enough operating money, to use that capital money to repair the facade so that they can take down the scaffolding. Can now correct me if I was wrong, because I may not know all the details, but we highlighted that, but still not much happened. So I checked with Susan this afternoon, and turns out the controller cannot move the money from capital budget to operation budget because it's illegal. And Kalina's office is also very helpful. Her office really tried to weigh in and help us, but I still don't see the scaffolding comes down. That's why I want to, like, when it comes to NYCHA subcommittee, I want to ask you, like, what is your goals? What do you want to achieve with, if we have this limitation, what can we do as a group? I'm opening up for the committee members. I see a hand. Oh, that's Alicia. Yes, Alicia. Yeah. Alicia. Alicia. Is that?
I'm so sorry. I'm having difficulties. I'm on my cell phone.
Okay.
So listen, one of the things I heard Itza when she said that there should be a unification of the developments in the with the tenant leaders in the area, and that is one of the things that I would like to see happen. Even though I'm no longer the chair of the community board, I'd like to make sure that this particular committee is near and dear to me because I live in Section 8 based housing. And I think that it's important for unification amongst everyone. All the developments, Section 8, along with the NYCHA developments, all of the resident leaders in our district should be unified in case there is something major that comes down the pipeline. Like, we never know. There's always uncertainty about money and and the budgets and all of this. And it's Section 8. Damaris was so dead on about the difference between Section 8 and Section 9. It's ridiculous. And the NYCHA residents really aren't prepared for what we deal with in Section 8 housing. They really have more leniency in the NYCHA developments than we do in Section 8. It is like unbelievable, the rules and regulations. So I think that that's one of the things I'd like to see is us really doing some outreach amongst ourselves as leaders in our community. Each one reach at least 10. If you know developments that have tenant leaders and you know those tenant leaders, get their names, get their email addresses. Let's form a union of some sort. I know that we are a community board and there's but so much we can do as a community board. We are not advocates. We are basically here to kind of be advisory. So, and because we're just advisory doesn't mean that we cannot have a network of people, just like more recently, our Arts and Culture Committee just did amongst the artists in the community. They try to link them together. So this is something that I love to see. This is a vision, I think, a friend of mine that passed away, Marie Christopher, wanted to have a tenant union of the Lower East Side. And I'd like to see that happen to some extent. I don't know how much we can do as a community board, but I know that it starts with unification and it starts with network. So that's one thing. I'm sorry for talking too long.
No, thank you for making those comments. I think you are absolutely correct. Outreaching is the next item on the agenda, but I get what you are saying. And also when you talk about like what the concerns you are about the finance part of it, session 9, session 8, those are policy issues. We can definitely, this community board can definitely deal with it. When you have a idea like a unified voice, this committee and this community board can support that. And next, Danette, I'm sorry, Danette.
Hi, good evening. My name is Danette Chavis. I live in LaGuardia Houses, and I just recently became the TA president of LaGuardia. I wanted to co-sign on what the young lady was just saying a few minutes ago about unifying. I wholeheartedly support that. I will definitely work towards that. And I agree with the issues that you raised between the difference between Section 8 and Section 9. 2 years ago, I was on a stakeholders committee and we would meet with NYCHA concerning their plans for our development, which is currently on pause right now. But I noticed in other meetings, web meetings with Greg, Russ, and the others, that was a major issue that I raised as far as the protections for tenants, because they insist to the tenants that the tenants have the same protections, but they don't. You have the same protections as far as what the law allows, but the landlord still has the option to put his own restrictions in those leases. So you don't really have the same protections, if you understand what I'm saying. But I agree and I support what she's saying 100%, and I think it should be done. I just wanted to speak up in agreement to her suggestion. Thank you.
The item after next is going to talk about the outreaching to the NYCHA TAs, so stay on for that. And committee members, so I just wanted to talk about like what to hear from you in terms of the roles of this committee. You hear from Alicia and also Danette, the issue they are talking about are policy issues. We can definitely look into those issues and support whatever outcome they are. However, this committee may not be able to deal with service issues. That's what I worry about. And I want you guys to let me know, what do you think about that?
Jackie,
yes.
It's Alicia again. I just want to make sure that everyone is clear what you mean by that. I think for clarification, what Jackie is saying is that when the resident leaders come to our community board meeting, you know, having a voice is so important, right? And so sometimes when people have a platform where they feel like they can express themselves freely, and someone is listening in at a different level of understanding, it becomes a free-for-all conversation around my development doesn't have doors, my development doesn't have this, the security is jacked up, this and that. And I mean, like, these are the things that I think, for clarification, Jackie, I don't know if I'm telling you the truth or not.
You are telling the truth. You are telling.
Okay, so we really just don't want to turn it into a come and vent session. This is an opportunity for us to really make a difference in the policies and the way things are being governed around affordable housing. Because, like I said, I am a resident in affordable housing for more than 30 something years, 35 years plus years in my life. And I definitely know that there have been major changes since I lived in my development. So I don't know, how does everyone else feel about that? Jackie, I'm giving it back to you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you. Canal, I want to know if you have any thoughts about that. The reason I'm sorry I put you on the spotlight. The reason I want to ask you is because of the Bracedi experience. I mean, we spent, back then you were not a community member, if I remember correctly. We spent a lot of time on Bracedi, but because of all these restrictions, and so turn out, do you see any, like, what did you see from the Bracedi, the whole Bracedi's experience?
You're talking to me, right? Can you?
Yes.
I've seen some changes, I guess.
Okay, good.
Forgive me. I'm trying to find my wording for it. I want to see a lot more of it. Like, from what I put in there, I put myself out there to put myself into it to understand what's happening. Before that, I didn't really understand anything. So the more I'm involved, the more I see. And I see a few improvements here and there.
Okay.
Did I answer your question properly?
Yes. So, but the scaffolding is still there, right?
Scaffolding is still there, and they said they won't be going nowhere for the next 5 years.
Okay, but I guess we highlighted your property, so at least you see some improvement, even though the major issue, the scaffolding, is still there.
Yes. Since I've been speaking up, we can't get rid of the scaffold, but other things have been done.
Okay, all right. Well, that's actually good. That's actually progress. Thank you for that. Olympia, I'm gonna let Sandra and Troy speak first, and then go to you. Okay, Sandra. Sandra. I'm just gonna go. Sandra.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. First of all, I'm not here as a board member. I'm actually on leave, but this is near and dear to my heart. Thank you, Alicia, for what you said, and Jackie for attempting to distinguish the policy from service. However, it's kind of a thin line, because we do have the capacity to call, and we have called NYCHA's operations to the table. So whereas we're able to talk to them about how they proceed in, for example, answering service calls, right? So whereas we don't actually get to complain about the particular issues, we do get to tell them that, well, you need to do this in a way that people, your response time, addressing how they do things as opposed to what they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And Troy.
Yes, Jackie, I have a couple of questions. You brought up Bracedi, then Alicia mentioned something about service, and we can't really handle service issues. I'm just unclear, because I believe Bracedi was a service issue. Am I correct? At the time that we addressed them?
So Bracedi's was not just the service, it was the service issue. That's why when we work on it, but we don't see much was improved. But I feel encouraged to hear from Canal that certain problem was resolved, but the main issue was the scaffolding. The main issue was that they didn't have the money to do local law 11, and the scaffolding has to be there. So we did a wrestle to advocate for Bracedi. We asked the comptroller's office to move the money from capital budget to operational budget to fund that local law 11. But and turned out they said they cannot do that. So the main issue remained there. It is a service issue. And we did make a resolution. We did support the Bracedi. What I'm saying is that that progress is not a lot, it's not substantial. That's not what I meant. And also, when they come to us, it wasn't about like, oh, whose door is broken, whose apartment's window is broken. We cannot deal with that. That's what I meant.
No, I got it. I just have one other question. Maybe Alicia could help. Alicia, so, and I'm addressing this to you because I think you would know the answer. We spoke about this many times when I chaired the NYCHA subcommittee. Is a thing like the construction problem in Baruch an item or a thing that we could go to the committees or back to NYCHA with and say, this is a big problem? Because actually it is. You know, if rats are a big problem, the construction there's a big problem that's been ongoing for 3 years. I live in Baruch, and I would definitely, you know, like to bring something like this up, you know, bring it to the table for discussion so that we could get these problems fixed, you know. And it's not only in Baruch. If you go to Jacob Reese, you go all the way up the FDR Drive, and there's still construction going on. And, you know, there's like no care for the people that live in these projects or in these developments to say anything, you know, and sometimes the construction is just dormant for months, you know. So I want to know if that's something that we could bring up, you know, in a meeting or as an agenda item going forward.
I believe that in the past, what we did was we invited Brian Honan to come out, and anyone that was involved in a particular subject like the sanitation portion or grounds or whatever, we invited different people that played a role in those NYCHA developments around that. So we can still do the same thing. We can invite Brian to come back and bring the people that are involved in the construction. We can ask for a meeting around that and just making sure that we're very clear about the agenda, and whatever questions we want to ask, we need to send them to them in advance so that they don't feel like they're put on a spot when they come to join us, because they're working off the clock. Many of the city agencies, after 5 o'clock, they don't get paid. So, you know, it's like a special thing that they have to put in order for them to work after 5 o'clock. I know, I just know that it is something that, you know, when we were talking about the compactors, the new compactors that came out a while ago, Brian had to bring those people with him. So we had to request that in advance. So if we want them to come out, sure, we can request that in advance and just say to them, you know, the residents of Jacob Reese, Lillian Wall, and Baruch houses want to know what's going on with the construction, what's happening, how long is the project? If they haven't heard from their resident leaders, because each one of those developments do have resident leaders. And if they're not having regular tenant meetings around the subject of what you're thinking about, you know, where are we as a community board? Yeah, we want to shed light to it, and possibly if there's a resolution that can be written about it. But I do believe that what's going to be told to me is that it's policy issues, and it's, you know, something that's ongoing that NYCHA already has in place. So unless we're there to ask for something in particular to get the resolution out, what are we asking for in the resolution? What are we asking? We have to be very clear about what it is that we want. Okay.
Okay. So like I'm sorry, Alicia. So if we're asking, can you hear me, Alicia?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we're asking something for like an update on construction, when it's gonna end, and if it's going in phases, you know, are to have safety issues or safety concerns addressed. Is that a thing that we should be doing as a committee?
If I may, on that, Troy, yes, because we have done that before. We have previously we had invited NYCHA to update us on all the construction projects. And I believe this committee did tell them the safety issue or the delay issue, the red issue. I think that we can do.
Yeah, they came out the last time. I mean, yeah. it was like maybe about 2 years ago, but they did come out. And like I said, Troy, we told, I guess his name, Brian Holman, we asked him to come and he brought some representatives that were, I guess, in charge of each specific thing that we requested. So like, as far as the sanitation, the groundskeepers, a few of them did come out. The thing is, yes, they came out. Do we need to network more and get more resident leaders and tenants to come out? Absolutely, because you're talking to the choir. If I continue to talk to Miss Aitza, or if I'm talking to Marquise and Miss Aitza, they may be able to spread the word to, like, you know, the resident leader, or Miss Aitza is a resident leader, but to a certain amount of tenants. But we want to reach the magnitude. We want to get to the people like, you know, hey, grandma that sits on the bench in the morning and she's tired and she's fed up with what she's seeing. No one gets to them. We need to get to those people that don't get an opportunity to hear what's really going on. And now that we're on Zoom, we're still on Zoom, and I'm assuming, I don't know if it's still like Troy, like Jackie said, we're not sure what's going to happen come January, but if the things are going in that direction with the variant, we may be able to get an extension, and then we can do like a networking and say to people, listen, it's on Zoom. You can get your phone, you can get your laptop or your child's iPad or whatever and get on and listen to this meeting and get your voice heard. Say what you need to say, because then we will have the proper representation at that meeting. You know, or even if we wanted to form like a little town hall around something like that. But that's something that Jackie's asking right now. What is the vision? What should we be doing? And Troy, that's good. That's one thing. We can call Brian and say, listen, people are concerned. These developments are under construction. It seems like forever. They're tired of it. When is it going to happen?
I think 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago, I don't recall, we actually invited NYCHA and all the construction people, not the engineer, but the construction management people. They came to present the Sandy construction update. And if I remember correctly, Beirut House has a serious delay. I remember that, but I don't recall all the details. And this committee also made a lot of input on the red issue and also garbage safety issues. And we can like ask them to come back to give us another, for an update. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that is actually like a broad issue. It's not specific related to one apartment or one door. And that is something we definitely can do.
Right.
I'm gonna go to Olympia.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I said if Aisha or Marquise wanted to go ahead, they could. I mean, first of all, thank you, because even the meeting that the conversation I heard earlier was so meaningful. And I'm one of these people who don't attend many of these meetings, but I usually watch them all because I care a lot about this issue. And one of the things that I wanted to contribute to the conversation, Jackie, is that very often what we lack as Community Board 3 is actually the knowledge on the ground. And so very often what may appear as a management issue actually is the result of bad policy to begin with, or lack of enforcement, or lack of appropriate funding, etc. That are all things in which Community Board 3 can weigh in meaningfully. So I think definitely, I echo Alisa, you don't want to have a place where everybody comes to vent for nothing and you know, it ends up being a cacophony of lamentation. But I think building upon the knowledge on the ground and creating a space where people can come together and say, okay, so we all understand we're sharing this pain. Why? And then together, you know, as a community board, we can do a lot of things in terms of, you know, either, as you said, getting in specific agencies doing the right thing, but also advocating for major policies. You know, that's what we've done that in the past. And I think we can do it again. On a practical level, it's great to see that you guys now are up to 11 members at this subcommittee, because there were moments while I've been following CB3 that they had 3 members. So I guess in order for the subcommittee to grow, I mean, it's going to be important that you can have monthly meetings and et cetera, so that people can also commit to be your secretary as needed, et cetera. Once, you know, it's a chicken and an egg thing. You know, the more you feel that the job is meaningful, the more you want to do the job. So that's my 2 cents. And thank you guys. You're all doing a great job.
Can I say something? We cannot meet monthly if there's 2 subcommittees on the community board. Just for clarification, Olympia, I want to make sure that we're all very clear about this. 2 subcommittees cannot meet in 1 month. We just don't do that. Okay, so we alternate.
Just quickly, Jackie, I'm sorry. Right now, this is a subcommittee which is under the land use committee, right? So I think I've only been in the job for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I'm still trying to figure out a lot of everything. So hearing tonight is very important to me, and so I can get a better feel for where the direction of this specific subcommittee is going to go. So I will make a decision on who becomes the chair after the meeting tonight, and I will let that person know that's what's going to happen, because I have to establish now a chair for this committee, and then we go from there. In terms of secretary, in terms of Zoom facilitator, we'll figure that out. And yes, to Olympia's point, I will try to make it as meaningful as possible. I know it is every other month, but I will do my best to support everybody in those roles. Jackie, I know you have 2 more people with their hands up, and then I can talk some more after that.
I just wanted to say that Ms. Laura Lugo just volunteered herself as our Zoom facilitator. So Laura, thank you so much for doing that, for stepping up. Thank you, Laura. And okay, so Makis and Aisha, so try to be brief because we have to move to the next topic. Makis?
Sure, thank you again for having me, and I definitely look forward to seeing the application, because I'll be signing up to join the community board as a CB3 resident. I just wanted to quickly speak to the question of what the focus should be of this group and how to do outreach. I want to partner with CB3, and so in the effort to do so, I would extend an invitation to join our meetings on Sunday. It is a vast range of tenant association presidents from across the city, and it's a great way to let them know what it is that you guys are doing. There are some CB3 presidents there, but it's also a way to come and just ask some questions, right? Like, what do you expect of your community board, and kind of see what kind of reactions you get from folks. I definitely have some suggestions, but I offer you to come and just meet with our residents on Sunday. We meet every Sunday from 3 to 5.
Thank you, Makis. Thank you, Aisha. Aisha?
I'm on. I just, first of all, I want to thank people who are sitting on this committee and who recognize the importance of NYCHA in our community. I would hope that it's not about people, that's what tenant association meetings are for, but I think that at the community planning board, it is issues that you can bring to the table and bring NYCHA to the table to address. Like, for instance, had I known that you were doing the Sandy recovery, I would have been on it to get an update. No, because I have serious concerns about how we've also been affected across the board, because all of the Lower East Side was hit with Sandy. And so we're having, you know, reconstruction, but the issues, and what happens is at least the guidance when you start asking questions. I can say as a resident leader and even as a resident that if you bring the issues to the table, residents will come to the meetings because they're going to learn something. Mm-hmm. So if you bring the issue to the table, the call center is my best. Like, how does the call center really function? And for any resident or for any resident leader and how we work with it, right? If you bring NYCHA to that's a policy decision. That is. And so those are the kind of things that I would want to see as a resident leader. I would want my residents to come, not to hear it from me, but to hear it from NYCHA itself and from other voices, because sometimes it's a different perspective. Let me put it that way. And I think it's important that you know, as a community board, that those questions are asked, so that, and you can maybe want to poll the resident leaders.
Yeah, thank you. That is a great suggestion. That is exactly what we are looking to hear. Because I was hoping to, because I'm not expert in NYCHA, so I'm hoping somebody can educate us, tell us the problem, but not tell us about your broken window, like your individual apartment's problem, but like the call center, it is a citywide, NYCHA-wide issue, so or project-wide, property-wide issue. So thank you for that. Can now gotta be brief because we need to move to the next item.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm what Aitza said, that, you know, having NYCHA, when I came to the community board to speak up, having NYCHA on there, different parts of NYCHA, to explain more about what was happening, it helped me understand and gave me a different perspective on how to go about it and how to face these issues and how to work towards these issues. I just wanted to say something towards that. I agree with that.
Thank you. I mean, I guess you can also hear NYCHA's limitation. Basically, they are telling you they don't have money, right? But with that kind of limitation, are there still anything else we can do? Or we as a community board, what kind of funding we want to support? We can advocate for that, whether they listen or not. But I guess at least we can do something about it policy-wise. Thank you, Kenna. So next, any committee members have more comments?
Jackie, I just got one more thing.
Yeah.
So I just heard from some of the resident leaders. I think some of you heard at the beginning of the meeting, I was just elected to the full board chair about 2 weeks ago. I guess, yeah, it's now 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to leave my email in the chat for all of you to reach out to me, so I get a better understanding from me personally, all of your roles and how I can be of better assistance to all of you as chair for CB3.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, next item about outreaching. So the outreaching, Ariana has some ideas. Ariana, do you want to share your ideas with us?
Sure. So after our last meeting, I think that there was a general consensus amongst everyone that we had to do a better job in engaging both residents and tenant association leaders to engage in these meetings and to attend. So one thing that I was thinking in a way to achieve that is to make sure that we are getting and spreading the word on when these meetings are held, and what is going to be on the agenda is that if each member of the board of the subcommittee could, you know, if we could divide basically by buildings per member, so that they have a direct relationship with certain buildings and the leaders of those buildings to get the word out whenever these issues are being brought up, it might be helpful. And that way we kind of split the work and also build more personal relationships, because not everybody that's in this committee lives in NYCHA buildings. And then those that do, they already have those kind of existing relationships within their own buildings. So I thought that was a suggestion. I'd be happy to hear what some people have to say on that.
That's a good suggestion. I do agree. I'm a project-based Section 8 building, and then there's 2 that are for the deaf across the street, and then there are 2 NYCHA developments. So I have 3 project-based Section 8 buildings, and then the 2 NYCHA developments near me. and I do have a relationship with one of the development resident leaders, and I can reach out to the other. So, and I do understand that the two buildings that are the deaf buildings, they do not have resident leaders yet. They are trying to organize right now.
Thank you, Alicia. Sandra?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that the committee has changed a bit on this outreach policy, because I have attempted in the past to outreach. But anyway, I just did that tonight. My friend Danette just got elected as president, and she got on immediately. As a resident leader myself, I have a lot of friends who are NYCHA presidents or Section 8 presidents. And I think one place where we can start is with compiling a list of them. And I don't think there's anyone better than Patricia Olin.
Yes, that's
Margaret
exactly
Chin's
what I'm
office.
going to say, yes.
Exactly, Patricia.
I'm trying to see if she's still here.
She has a listing of all the NYCHA. So I think we should probably put together a listing and maybe maybe an email blast, and maybe that's something that the secretary could do, just letting people know. I understand that we are a subcommittee and therefore can only meet every other month, but I think that's good if that's what it is, as long as it is consistent. We haven't been consistent in the past, and we need to do that, because residents only work when they can have assurance that something is going to occur, when they know that they have something to look forward to. That's all.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. I'm going to ask Patricia to share her list of TA contacts within our district with us, and then I'll share those contacts with you guys, and you guys decide if you want to be responsible for any particular properties you want to build a connection with them. That's something I can do. Let me see. Any other comments? Ariana?
I was also wondering, how feasible is it for us to be able to put up some sort of like permanent flyer or notice in like the lobbies of these buildings that maybe has like a QR code that goes directly to the calendar website for CB3, and just like a general notice, like if you would like to join the CB3 meeting, it happens, at this time. And then obviously once they add, scan the code or whatever, it would say for that month's meeting, instead of having to, go every month or before every meeting to pass out or distribute flyers, like some sort of permanent notice of when these meetings take place that, would be flexible.
Yeah, and also we could just share the Community Board 3 website, because that's always listed on the website. It's the most updated, yeah.
Yeah, I prefer that way. And Ariana, the reason I prefer website than QR code is because I'm a dinosaur, so I don't know QR code that well, to be honest with you, and I don't know about other people. And also, I'm seeing the consistency issue here, because it's not just this committee, right? So I guess for that I may have to bring back to our executive committee to see if other committee likes that idea, or what is the I guess feasibility. But I like your idea. It's just that I think for now, if we are circulating the website, it should be good enough.
I'm gonna jump in there, Jackie.
Jackie, you have a.
Go ahead, Troy.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry. I just want to go back to something that Ariana said, because I remember in past meetings, I've asked for flyers to be distributed, and we were told by the office that we don't do that. So I'm a little confused on that, but I believe that would be a great idea. If we have something.
Troy, let me just give you some clarification. The office doesn't do flyering. That's what I think there was a miscommunication or confusion, but the office doesn't do flyering. We as a committee individually can always flyer, but we have to get the heading. We get the heading from the office, but they don't do distribution. Only We as the members of the committee can do that, but they cannot.
Yeah, Alicia, I went through this and I said that I would have the kids from my group put up the flyers in the building. And I believe it was, that's not something that we really do as a community board. So that's all. I just think that it would be a great idea.
Okay, Troy, when Nancy was the chair of this particular committee, I don't want to do too much back and forth, and I do apologize, Jackie. But when Nancy was the chair of this committee, Nancy used to be responsible for flyering her development. She did her own development and those that she knew around her development, that resident leaders in her area. But again, I don't know where the miscommunication came from. I just know that I was always told that it is not the office's responsibility for that. That's the reason why they encourage people to sign up, put their name, to have the emailing of the calendar every month. So if we can get residents to understand, if they put their name on the mailing list, on the CB3 mailing list, they're going to get a calendar every single month, so long as they want to be a part of getting that monthly calendar and the monthly meeting acknowledgement.
Thank you, Alicia. Sandra and Paul.
Ariana, first, I think that is an excellent idea. As a tenant leader, I have a place where a permanent flyer, it's an excellent idea. It creates static memory that people can know what to look forward to. And to add on to what Troy just said, I am in total agreement with him. I personally have asked the office, can I do a flyer for my development? And I was told no. When I tried to reach out to other resident leaders, I was told no, it's not my position to do so. So I'm glad that going forward, we have this clarification and we're discussing this openly and honestly, because that has not been the perceived practice previous to now. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you for the comments. I'm just going back to when Nancy was the chair. I just want to give all the details. Nancy created her own flyer. She printed out, she distributed to the properties. It didn't go through Susan. She just alerted Susan that she was doing that. So if you want to print out I guess you can go to the office and print it out. But
I did this. Pardon me, Jackie. I did the same thing. And Susan, I sent the flyer to Susan. Susan said, I cannot do my own. It has to come to CB3. And she gave me a flyer to post in my building. It was specifically about the recertification process for Section 8 tenants.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Sandra. Sorry, Jackie. I just want to jump in here. I don't want to talk about stuff that's happened in the past with the office, with anything of that sort. There's no need for that. Previous chairs, anything of that sort. I think today's December 6, 2021. I'm not interested in hearing what happened in 2020, 2019, or anything of those past practices. I think what I'm hearing here throughout all these conversations is a change in our outreach policies, right? Or a potential change in our outreach policies. And that's going to go through the executive committee. And that's something I'm going to pitch. I want to hear, I want to listen, I want to change things. Yes, absolutely. I want us to have a stronger social media presence. We do not have that. That has not happened at CB3. And I want that to be a little bit more stronger so that can help with the outreach process. I believe there's something in the chat before saying how tenants associations have a strong Facebook presence. I would like for us to have that same presence and same presence on Twitter and any other social media platforms to get meetings out so more people can come out, whether it's on Zoom or face-to-face, whether that happens or not. So I don't want us to drag the office. I don't want us to drag anything that's happened in the past. I'm hearing everything, I'm taking it in, I'm noting it up, and I will move forward from there with the executive committee. And then we can talk about what our policies look like in terms of how do we outreach for these types of meetings. And I'm going to leave it at that. Jackie, you can wrap this up if you want.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul, for jumping in. Are there any other comments? If no, we're gonna wrap up the meeting. Okay, hearing none, I see no hands. So I'm gonna, oh, Ms. Poland. Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion. Jackie, I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Any
Jackie,
second?
you need a roll call vote. You need a roll call vote.
Yes, we need a roll. Anyone second? Did Eric? Second. Thank you, Laura. Ariana, can you do a roll calling to adjourn the meeting?
Sure. Jackie Wong?
Yes.
Alicia Lewis-Coleman?
Yes.
Eric Diaz?
Yes.
Danielle Hernandez?
Yes.
Laura Lugo?
Yeah.
Tariq Dorrell?
Yes.
Sandra Strother?
Sandra is on leave. Tonight, she is not a community board member.
Troy Velez?
Yes.
Ariadna Chua here, and then Camille Napoleon.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys. Thank you, Olympia, for joining us tonight.
I'm sorry, everybody. Really quickly, for those that are members, please don't forget the 16th is the cutoff date. If you're attending the holiday party, and also if you're donating anything for the staff, for the gifts for the staff. Thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for helping with the Zoom tonight. Thank you very much. And Ariana, thank you for taking the minutes. Bye. Good night.
Bye, Jackie.
Bye.